Welcome everybody to physics today. We're going to talk about soccer punt, which I probably used the wrong term. I said, the same y plane, which to me, the y is the only defining math or number, because if it's a plane that's horizontal, every x is in there. So really, to me, I think we should call it a y-plane, but whatever, it's a horizontal plane. All the x's, okay? So when we start and stop on the same horizontal, then there's some things that we can do that make everything pretty easy. So the first thing that you want to do, I got to ask you this. When can you do math with this number? When can you do the math with this number? Like, very correct. Never can you do the math with that number because it's x and y stuff together. And the problem with that is the y part is changing, the x part isn't. So you can't do the math with that. Okay, let me ask you this. If you have this, or any time, what do you get out of that? If you're starting and stopping on the same horizontal plane. What do you always have if you have time? This is a y component, and this is the one thing that's shared between the x and the y. But if you have time, you can always find the y velocity, right? Okay, so for example, if this is my full time to go up and to go down, how much time does it take to go there? 2 seconds, right? So right off the bat, I know this is 20 meters per second because I'm accelerating downwards 10 meters per second every second. So if it took 2 seconds, I must have been going 20. If it takes 4.5 seconds, I must have been going 45. And the formula that you're using when you do that in your head is this, and you're saying up here, the v is 0, so it's a negative v sub naught equals at. Negative 10 times 2, you get 20 meters per second. And that's what you're doing in your head. Okay, hey, I got another question. What happens, or what can I do, if I have a right triangle, and I have at least one leg, and then one of anything else? What do I have? So I have one leg for sure, and then I can have either another leg, or a hypotenuse, or an angle. Just one other thing. What do I have? That's right, you have a whole triangle. So if you have two parts of any triangle, and one of them is a side, it doesn't have to necessarily be a leg, it could be the hypotenuse. Then you can do SOHCAHTOA stuff, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So you have the whole triangle. You have one side and one of anything else. Okay, so don't forget that. Okay, so maybe let's look at a specific situation. Like for example, if I have a velocity like this, and I have a time that's equal to 20 seconds. Okay, in your head, what are you saying? What do you have right now? So this is the soccer punt, 20 seconds for the whole play. What can you find out right away? The y velocity, right? Because the velocity in the y direction is going to be equal to acceleration times time if I use half the time, right? Because up here, I'm going to be halfway up there. It takes half the time to get up, half the time to get down. So I right now can say my v sub naught in the y direction is 100 meters per second. Because half that time is 10, right? So 10 times 10. So now, all of a sudden, I've got one leg. Right? Well, here's the other part. Let's say that I know that this thing goes 400 meters. Okay, so you can just use your simple velocity equals displacement per time. knowing that this velocity doesn't change if it's in the x direction. There's no force that's not completely perpendicular to that. Or you can use this formula, which is the same formula, plus 1/2 at squared, but there's no acceleration. So your x, which is 400, divided by, now does it take the total time to do this? It takes the total time, right? So divided by 20, so my velocity in the x direction is 20. So now I've got two parts of my triangle, 20 and 100. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. And then I actually have my velocity. So I can never do math with this, but it's always the answer at the beginning, or you know, it's kind of what we're going for. That's the actual true velocity, is this. It just doesn't work out to do the math with it together. But this isn't really a velocity by itself, because all I have is the magnitude here, right? So what makes this a velocity is setting it in space so I know its direction, because velocity is a vector, and it needs to have a direction in there. Well, let's look at another situation. Let's say that we have maybe 50 meters per second, and we know that the time that this takes is 30 seconds. Can I solve for displacement? Well, I know that displacement is time times velocity in the x direction. Do I have velocity in the x or velocity in the y? Which one can I find right away? The y, right? So I know it takes half the time to go up, half the time to go down. Or, is there another way to do that? Well, there is another way to do that. I won't show it right now, I guess. So we'll say this here is 150, wait, 15, yeah, this is not a real problem, is it? That's too much time for that vector. Let's change this to 3 seconds. Okay, 3 seconds. So it takes 1.5 seconds to get to the top, right? So V equals AT, V equals 10 times 1.5, 15 meters per second. Okay, so now I'm in. I got two parts of a triangle, now I can do everything else, right? Because a squared plus b squared equals c squared, so velocity in the x direction equals the square root of 50 squared minus 15 squared. And my full time that this takes then is that times 50 squared minus 15 squared, whatever that root is. Now I have my displacement in the x direction. Do you have questions about that? And kind of another situation, let's say that we have, 150 meters, and we know that the time is 3 seconds. What do we have right now? So this might be the easiest one because your velocity in the x direction is displacement per time. And we have displacement of 150 divided by the full time. So right there we've got v sub x equals 50. And oh, by the way, we must have 15 meters per second too, because I know it takes half the time to get that to 0 meters per second, as long as we start and stop on the same horizontal plane defined by a y coordinate. So we can do that too. Okay, so hopefully that helps you out a little bit more if you're having problems this weekend. The assignment will be due on Tuesday. Now we have to go do this for real, so we're going to do a soccer pump lab.